A recent hard-hitting expose has laid bare the truth the entire right-wing scene once buried. The centre-right is absolutely infested with financial misconduct, grifting on an epic scale, scams, and outright lies. While the Tories and Reform play their safety valve game and pretends to be the answer, the nationalist movement is riddled with corruption, division, and weak organisation falling apart. Here's the hard, uncomfortable truth. The centre-right doesn't just fail the British people, it scams them while doing it. Nigel Farage and the usual suspects are professional grifters, but most so-called ethno-nationalist groups are just as pathetic, destroyed by ego, drama, and Zoomers acting like little shit. Only one organisation stands apart, the National Front, because it refuses to abandon its core beliefs. Simon Tomlin from the Daily Agenda just dropped a bombshell video exposing the rot across the right, and the mask has completely slipped. The mainstream centre-right and the wider nationalist scene are both drowning in grift, lying and betrayal of the native British people. In today's video, we're going deep on why the centre-right is nothing but a scam machine, how most ethno-nationalist groups have collapsed into weakness and drama, and why the National Front remains the only clean, principled force that actually sticks to core beliefs without flag-shagging or arse-licking Tories. We will go into the depth of the deception and the weakness that runs very deep. The centre-right, Tories, Reform, and their fake alternatives isn't just compromise, it's actively scamming nationalists out of time, money, and hope. They promise the moon on immigration and sovereignty, then deliver record migration, net zero betrayal, and endless safety valve operations that stabilise the decline instead of reversing it. The collective right is riddled with financial crime, corruption, obtaining money by deception, and money laundering. These aren't honest politicians. They're political prostitutes selling out the native British people for book deals, media appearances, and donor cash. Reform talks tough while platforming civic nationalists and multiracial conservatives. The Tories under Johnson and Sunak open the floodgates and now pretends to be shocked by the consequences. It's all a grift, all lies, and it keeps the British people distracted while demographic replacement marches on. The rest of the so-called ethno-nationalist scene is no better. In fact, it's even more pathetic and self-destructive. Thatcher's alternative had turned into a Hitler-singing grift fest full of infighting and financial questions. And though people will get angry about me talking about Kohler, even though I have been quite vocal against Kohler and his decisions, and as well to do with the financial side of Thatcher's alternative things, this also applies to the Homeland Party, which has lost all of its grasp of its original principles and is in total tatters after endless internal explosions. The British Democrats are a joke, especially what happened with Kai Stevens and the local elections, which came last and got 77 votes, which is pretty laughable. And then there's Restore Britain. Founded by people Farage personally kicked out. It was supposed to be the clean alternative, the fresh start. But watch what happens as soon as Restore Britain tries to go mainstream and copy Reformed civic nationalism, multiracial, flag-shagging playbook, it will implode exactly the same way. They're already showing the same weakness, refusing to address demographic reality head-on, chasing respectability and watering down everything so they don't scare the normies away. It's the same trap every single time. On top of that, the Zoomers have been absolute little shits across the entire scene, bringing performative sadism, death threats, and endless online beef, and the drama that destroys real organisation before it can even get off the ground. They treat nationalism like a TikTok Klaus chase instead of fighting for racial and national survival. And the latest example of how weak these groups really are, that woman who got removed from attending a speech simply because she dared to talk openly about white people. She literally got kicked out or disinvited for stating the obvious, that the native British people, or the white people as it's referred to, population is being replaced and needs protecting. That single incident tells you everything. Even the racial nationalist events are still cut, still terrified of the Overton window, and still more worried about looking racist than actually saving their own people. They'd rather police their own speakers than confront the demographic truth, and have a dialexicon of that's decided, like what happened with similar between Reform and Herb Not Hate, and then getting involved with the organisation or trying to control it in some shape or form in order to keep, in quote, their platform clean. when they should be unapologetic about being racial nationalists, of which they're not. This is why organisations stay weak and keep collapsing. They abandon their core belief, and the second it gets uncomfortable, no wonder they're all in ruins while the system laughs. This is exactly why Simon Tomlin is right. The National Front is the only organisation free of financial misconduct, grifting, and the endless division that plagues the rest of the scene. NF leader Tony Martin is a decent ex-soldier committed to ethno-nationalism, fighting for race and nation without apology. They have never abandoned their founding principles. No scams, no money laundering, no arse-licking Tories, or shag-the-flag performative patriotism that achieves nothing. While every other group chases headlines, chases reforms, curtails, or collapses into drama and respectability politics, the NF quietly sticks to the fundamentals: borders, identity, and demographic survival, and putting the native British people first. This is what real, uncompromising nationalism looks like. It avoids corruption by refusing to play the safety valve game. It demands principles over personalities. If we want to survive as a people, this is the model we need to support and rebuild. Not the weak, drama-filled organisations that have already proven that they can't be trusted. The centre-right grift and the nationalist dramas are two sides of the same coin, both designed to keep the British people weak, divided and distracted. Stop falling for the scams or putting people on messiah complexes, including Nigel Farage and someone like Rupert Lowe as well, or even Ben Habib for that matter, as well the lies and the weakness. The only real change comes from organisations that refuse to compromise on their core beliefs. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video about me talking about the, to do with the National Front. Now, obviously I haven't talked about these guys well enough in detail, and obviously I'll get into that in a minute, but I just wanted to really emphasize on why it's important to not abandon your corporate principles. Now, if I was in, let's say, something like with what happened with the Homeland Party, I think that it's really important to make sure that you don't abandon your beliefs. Now, I don't think, in my opinion, they have, but what's happened with the recent drama that happened last summer, which I've already covered like a grilling amount of times, because it's really important to talk about these things. I think it's really important to actually go into detail of what went wrong, and also to try and fix the issues, and basically try to not play the centre-right game. And this is why it goes into all of the things like including Tommy Robinson and all his scummy drama. And you see all these people bigging Tommy up online, defending him, and, like I, for example, have made videos on Tommy Robinson. Well, I made one in particular, and going over his history. And what ended up happening was the Tommy Tards would basically say, "Oh, do your bloody research," to just resort to ad hominems and calling you, in quote, a dickhead. And because of all of this nonsensical drama, especially from the CivNats and the center-right, because they're not really that different, they're basically cut from the same cloth, especially like with the centre-left. And because of all of this, infighting and drama, these people just basically don't care about racial nationalism, and they only care about the civic side of things, where they basically want to keep, like with Tommy Robinson, "Oh, love me Jews, love me blokes, love me sniff." All of that stuff. And because of this, it makes it very hard for nationalism in this country to succeed. And you've got all these retards, scamming, grifting, like, for example, what happened with Peter Lynch, and basically he took, like, what was it, £80,000, and there was some, as well, issues with the drama to do with, I think, was it Dean Neal, the traditional bricklayer, and to do with Tommy Robinson, and to do with the Peter Lynch dates, where there was some evidence that he has basically committed financial conduct and obtaining money by deception. Now, obviously, if you remember, the Peter Lynch is that who basically he went and self-oothed himself in prison, and essentially he tried to raise Tommy Robinson and his lot, or the Eben Scoop, tried to raise money for him, and it ended up taking the money from the Peter Lynch family. Now, he said that the Peter Lynch family, in quote, didn't want it, when in reality they actually did. And because of this and all this deception and money laundering, you also see this happen with, someone like to do with Nigel Farage. As I've also covered it in my video, with him taking bribes off, donor money, but also to do with oil companies, denying net zero, and obviously to do with the green stuff, where people would say that, "Oh, I'd be in support of the Green Party because they love sustainability so much and want to, basically abolish nuclear energy," which is retarded. I'm very pro-nuclear energy. I think it's a lot cheaper, and I think it's a lot good, as long as you do it correctly, obviously, because people say it's expensive, but I've already covered that in another video. And because of this, when there is corruption within the centre-right, with all the grift money, the lying, and all of this stuff, this is why, like I said, nationalism can't succeed, especially in these spaces. Now, especially when it comes down to Restore Britain, as I mentioned earlier before, who she is, and she basically talked about white people, and essentially because they want to have the hurt not hate, if you don't know that, our version of ADL, where basically they like to police people's speech and call people racist, neo-Nazi, fascist. Yeah, they've covered a lot of articles like Steve Lawson, a historian, even people from the Homeland Party. And because of this, obviously, they want to police people's speech. And I think that people would say, oh, well, it's actually good optics to basically say not talk about white people. But, I mean, to be fair, let's be honest. Now, let's be honest, we're pretty much running out of time, aren't we? You know, with this course of, balkanization, we've only probably got a couple of years left until it fully starts to set in the first wave. And obviously, decades of mass immigration has not helped. And because of this, I think that all the things that come with it, you should just be unapologetically racially pro your own race. And obviously, there are some WigNat elements to this where they're going about race and nation, but I do think that is very important, where obviously because a lot of the WigNats obsess over the race stuff, but like I said, I just think that isn't something that you want to focus or even remove someone talking about the whole white thing. And obviously isn't appealing to normies. I think Homeland had this issue where they would basically, I think I spoke with one of the members, and he said oh, we shouldn't talk about the race stuff like black, white, liberal nonsense, which you could say, because before, if you didn't know, on the census records, it was basically British, and then it was although it was African or something, but that's why nowadays when you look on the census records, it will say black, Asian, mixed household, and then white, or the British native people. And because of this, people think that it's basically not optics cooking, and people think you'll turn people off. But there is nothing actually against I think the Electoral Commission, where the Electoral Commission basically says that if you want a political party within the UK, you have to basically follow certain rules. Now, I don't know if there's any rules against talking about race. I don't think there actually is, as long as you don't start spamming N-word like some other WigNats would do, like some edgy Omegle streamers. But I think when it comes down to it, it's not really an issue. So maybe Rupert Lowe can't actually put down or lay down the thing for Restore Britain, but like I said, all these Zoomers are basically bigging him up, and this is probably just another line in the sand. And eventually, I predict when Restore implodes, there's two things are probably going to happen, or three things I predict. One is that Steve Laws will break off from it because Rupert got too cooked, because he's a Tory, and he'll basically end up going off and make his own, I don't know, crappy party. They'll probably have 100 members like he did with Free Migration Now. And then another prediction I have is that Charlie Downs will take over. Now, Charlie Downs, don't know too much on his history, but I know he's been one of the speakers for Restore Britain. And he's got a little bit of a history and to do with who's in bed with who. Kai Stevens apparently spoke to Simon Tomlin, and Simon Tomlin basically said about what Kai told him, where Charlie Downs and Steve Laws would be kind of a little bit cozy in the DM, supposedly. Again, not alleging or anything, but there's to do with Charlie Downs' history with him, with doing the CivNat stuff, with him pictures with other blacks, to do with Christian nationalism, which again is Christian nationalism, in my opinion, has never worked. Basically can't really work ever, because religion and politics don't really mix very well. But again, like I said, I've covered that in another video. And because of this, I'm not sure if someone like him, because like I said, Rupert is very old. He's not going to be around in politics for very long. Like I said, he's a Tory. So he will just probably end up leaving, and maybe Charlie Downs, or maybe someone even Steve Laws would. But again, like I said, I think Steve Laws, or Zuma historian, has said that Steve isn't a leader. He's not someone that wants to be a leader. He's just kind of the cheerleader or the political prostitute. Well, not what Zuma said, but like I said, I think that when it implodes in on stealth, and then another third option would be that a base called the Zoomers have basically just give up and probably just, I don't know, probably go to another organisation and wreck. And with all these predictions, and a lot of people don't like it when I made that video, or some people got angry when I made that video about Restore, why I'm not going and on my knees and sucking another Tory safety valve operations dick. And like I said, with Rupert Slow and his history to do with getting in bed with Rishi Sunak's wife, further money, him being a Zionist, because he basically said that our government should support them, or we should support them. It's just eventually all these Zoomers that are bigging him up with all these gay little edits of Rupert and then Oliver Cromwell and all this stuff is, like I said, it's just going to implode on itself. So don't come crying to me if that happens, because quite frankly, I don't really give a shit at this point. I want good, decent people in a political organisation that is unapologetic about its race, unapologetic about our policies that are obviously legal and lawful, and make sure that they're, getting cooked and basically running off to the center-right, because if you run off to the center-right and start getting in bed with conservatives or Tories, it's basically Jehovah, or even something like Resignism, which people got paranoid about the Homeland Party around that. But again, that's to do with Pete North, and I think that's probably just because of his vague obsession with Israel or something, but I won't get into that too much. I think that's just more of his special interest as an artist. And like I said, I can probably relate to some of the things he said, but yeah, even he's also mentioned in one of his Twitter posts that, it's going to face the same challenges, and when it picks an ideology, all the Zoomers will basically spit their dummies out and start crying and whining online. And as well, if you want to go in the link in the description, links to my other channels and Discord as well.